Chapter Volume 120. That world, this world. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. The travel. Warned students of other departments also finally arrived. Before that, all of the self-defense department students already had another big meal. At the very end of the ranks, a hobbling Meng Bai appeared in Lin Shi's line of sight. Lin Shi. As soon as he saw Lin Shi, who was standing together with the other self-defense department new students, this little fatty whose face clearly became a ring thinner was already about to cry. Wow! However, as soon as he heard that he could eat what he wanted in this courtyard, in just the blink of an eye, Meng Bai appeared at the very front of the pack. Lin Shi saw Zhang Ping and Xiang Lin at the middle of the ranks, both of them looking famished. When the two saw Lin Shi, they also immediately nodded their heads in his direction. Lin Shi's eyes then landed on Gao Yanan's body. This young lady, who made his heart rate speed up a bit, already removed her cloak, her face also seemingly a bit slimmer. Then, she picked a few things in an extremely natural manner, and then she rubbed her own legs while slowly eating. It seemed like these few days of trekking weren't all that pleasant for her either. When did guys get here? What did you guys eat these past few days? When they were more or less full, those like Meng Bai and Lin Shi, whose relationships were rather good, naturally began to quietly interact. We already got here yesterday, those large yellow antelopes and elks. You guys actually ate that well. What? Then was it that bad for you all? What did you guys eat? We ate almost everything: rabbits, grassroots, snakes, even bugs. Ah! Lin Shi and a group of self-defense department people's eyes immediately widened, feeling that the black-haired man was much more lovely. Turns out, even though Meng Bai's group didn't get hurried on with their trip as much, they learned how to fill their own stomachs while traveling through the wilderness, thus using up quite a bit of time. The worst part of it all was that most of their bellies weren't even filled. That black-robed middle-aged professor's theory was extremely simple. Only when hungry can one clearly remember what kind of things can be eaten, and what kind of things shouldn't even be touched. Aren't these things what our self-defense department people ought to learn the most? Why did your statecraft, internal study, natural arts, and medicine department people instead end up learning them? Li Kaiyun couldn't help but secretly ask Xiang Lin, Meng Bai, and Zhang Ping. Xiang Lin said with a low voice, "Before, there was a statecraft department senior brother who was trapped with a border army troop in a desolate valley for half a month. In the end, it was only because that statecraft department senior brother learned these skills in the academy that he ended up surviving. When the various departments are undergoing trials of self-tempering, there is still a chance that they might be chosen to head out to the border army." Dang, dang, dang. While most of the new students were already starting to chat idly with each other in low voices, sharp and clear striking sounds rang out. A row of more than 20 black-robed lecturers walked out in a stern but unhurried manner from a corridor, appearing before them. Vice Principal Xia. All of the lecturers who walked out bowed respectfully towards the single-armed elder whose face reflected great hardships. This single-armed elder didn't say anything, only nodding towards these lecturers. "Everyone, line up into 2 rows and follow us." A 50-something, pale-faced black-robed lecturer immediately said this coldly to all of the new students. Then, all of these lecturers turned around, walking along the corridor they previously came out from. This black-robed lecturer's left eye was caved in, not bright, a single-eyed individual. Apart from this, there was also a long scar running down his left cheek. His appearance and tone of speaking left many of the new students extremely scared, all of them immediately lining up into 2 rows, following behind Vice Principal Xia, as well as the other professors and lecturers. All of the new students, including Lin Shi, continuously sized up their surroundings. This corridor's floor was completely covered in white marble, with a relief sculpture every few dozen steps, what was carved always a green lawn and some decorative patterns. Everyone noticed that the ground was extremely worn, extremely ancient. The palace halls that towered before them all looked extremely close, but only now that they were truly moving through them, did all of the new students realize that they were actually quite far apart. There were some that were separated by large expanses of woods, some separated by rocks and hills. The courtyard they were at before, the location on this mountaintop, could only be considered a city gate. After leaving this corridor, those lecturers and professors up ahead then stepped on a wooden path. This wooden walkway passed straight through a forest, and then it actually went through the center of a giant bell tower. This bell tower was created through rectangular yellow stones, a large bronze bell hanging from the roof. Long weeds grew from the cracks between the yellow stones. After passing through this bell tower, the wooden path forked many times, but these lecturers and professors continued straight forward. At the end of this road was an imposing and majestic circular palace hall. Lin Shi's breathing suddenly became a bit difficult. This circular hall had 3 layers, the topmost black, middle yellow, lowest one green, the colored glass these 3 colors. This was clearly in the style of Temple of Heaven. However, this circular 3-layered hall was 3 to 4 times larger than the Temple of Heaven. This temple was supported by 20.8 golden gilded Chinese cedar trees. The Green Yuan Academy lecturers and professors moved aside the curtains, entering the main hall. The ground was covered in giant blue-colored bricks. Inside the palace, every few dozen steps, there would be a row of copper crane-shaped oil lamps. These oil lamps were already lit, lighting up the architraves brilliantly. Portrayed on the relief sculptures were scenes of wars. What was engraved on the eastern and western temple dome walls were the images of a qilin and a mandarin duck. The rear figure of a middle-aged uncle towered at the end of a strip of ruined city walls, and outside those city walls, were densely packed corpses and great armies, this scene making everyone feel shocked and suffocated. The inside of the great palace was extremely spacious. 12 bronze lotus seat lamps surrounded a dark red stele. This stele was originally a piece of the past Starfall city's walls. The black-robed, single-eyed lecturer's stern and cold voice rang through this great hall, making all of the new students tremble inwardly. Line up before this stele, receive the advice the principal has left for all of you. Under the stern voice, Lin Shi lined up before this stele. This was Green Yuan Academy's most important tradition. All of the new students saw the runes carved on this stele. Indeed, these runes were just too strange for them, impossible to understand. Only, the name, Principal Zhang, made them feel the most devout respect and reverence. However, the instant he saw the runes on this stele, Lin Shi didn't know exactly what kind of feeling his mind was experiencing, whether he ought to roar towards the sky or cry out loudly. It was because the runes on this stele, for him, were just simplified Chinese. Fellow Otherworlder, you finally came. It really isn't easy, even television sets are hard to explain, it really makes one feel helpless. This string of runes that left all of Green Yuan Academy's professors at a loss rushed at them with the aura of an entire world. At this moment, he confirmed that the legendary middle-aged uncle was a traveler from the same place he came from. At this moment, he knew that he didn't just experience an extremely long dream. Everything about him really did exist in this world. He wasn't alone in this world. This was a sense of intimacy that was fundamentally difficult to suppress. Meanwhile, he was sure that this middle-aged uncle was also like himself, or else he wouldn't have left this type of sentence on the very first line of this stele. Lin Shi's entire body was shaking slightly. As if there was no one around him, he stared at the characters on the stele that used to be incredibly familiar to him, continuing to read them. I came from Chongqing City. Before arriving in this world, I was a high school physics teacher. Where did you come from, and what did you do before coming here? I came from Wuxi, a student, Lin Shi replied inwardly. If you are reading the words on this stele, then I am definitely no longer in Green Yuan Academy. I might be stating the obvious, however, since you can understand these words, then as a comrade from the same place, you shouldn't mind me rambling on a bit, since you came after me, then you shouldn't know as much about this world as me, right? However, unless you are a doctoral student of astrophysics, I still advise you not to waste energy on figuring out just what kind of place this is, because even after all these years, I still haven't been able to figure anything out. The sun, moon, and stars are just like Earth's, but our planet doesn't seem to have experienced a dynasty like this before. Just what kind of parallel universe is this, what kind of dimension? Thinking about this stuff is all meaningless. What my intention is, since you came, then you should live a bit better, live a life that is a bit more brilliant. Uncle, my thoughts are just like yours, Lin Shi quietly said to himself, as if he was having a conversation with the middle-aged uncle on the other side. By now, you must have also realized that this world's people have formidable fighting strength, they call it soul force. Of course, I've always interpreted it as mental force or spiritual force. Perhaps it might be easier for you to understand it as a supernatural power, some true chi, internal chi produced through meditation. All of this is fine, the formidable individuals really are incredible. It isn't an exaggeration at all to say that bullets are completely useless against those who are a bit more amazing, which is why I recommend that you not vainly think that setting up a firepower army will allow you to dominate the world. Honestly speaking, I've experimented with gunpowder before, but this world doesn't seem to have much materials for making gunpowder, so just properly cultivate this soul force. Alright, back to the main point. The most important thing is, in your head, do you have a roulette? Lin Shi sucked in a deep breath. This question came extremely abruptly, yet this made him feel an urge to cry. Inside his head, when he searched with his perception, there was a green light, as if there was a shining green roulette. If you don't have one, then don't feel bad or anything, you just won't understand what I am saying here, so just skip over it. If you do have one, have you discovered that each time you use it once, you could return to 10 halts time, which is also 10 minutes before. On this matter, I actually spent quite the time studying it. As for just what kind of power was used to produce this type of supernatural power, it is too hard for me to deduce, but as for how this thing took form, I managed to surmise a possibility. It might be that our souls occupied our bodies in this world, while the soul force of our body's soul in this world merged with the energy that caused us to transmigrate into this world, thus producing this type of thing. This type of roulette, from a physics standpoint, should also be a type of energy I reckon. Moreover, right now, I can tell you extremely seriously that this roulette can be slowly pushed. 1. Temple of Heaven in Beijing. Chapter Volume 121. That middle-aged idiot uncle, you are listening at novelfull.audio. This roulette, it can be pushed bit by bit. Lin Shi just couldn't understand. While carrying emotions of disbelief, he continued reading. The writing in characters he couldn't be any more familiar with was extremely easygoing. You probably know about the soul force's cultivation levels, right? Then, if you are like me, can feel this roulette in your head, then once you cultivate to soul expert level, you will understand the meaning behind what I just said. Also, once you reach state night level, you'll then discover something else. Also, isn't your cultivation aptitude rather poor? Is it just like mine, also too? If it is, then once you start your cultivation, it really will be a bit slow. However, let me tell you, even an aptitude of 2 has its own benefits. Your status won't be that great, so you can be comparatively more low profile. In this world, being a bit more low-key is also good, because no matter how great your cultivation is, soul force will still be consumed. A great army can still drown you to death, even if you reach state night level, able to hack through 100 layers of heavy armor, your soul force can still be exhausted. This world still has many powerful individuals. Also, perhaps because what we can hold is equivalent to 2 souls, the amount of soul force we can accumulate is double that of an ordinary person. As for why exactly this is good, even if you don't understand right now, since you already entered Green One Academy, you'll definitely understand soon, fellow otherworlder who I've yet to meet. What else do I want to tell you? Apart from no one else being able to understand the things from our past world, this really is quite the interesting world. Right, my arrival at Green One Academy is actually not by chance. I snuck into Imperial City and saw some records unreleased to the public. The cultivation method of this world seems to be related to the legends of the ancient devils and ancient immortals. How do I explain this? I guess in a way that is easier for people like us to understand. Many years ago, there were a group of extraterrestrials called ancient immortals who came to this earth, and then afterwards, there was another group of extraterrestrials called ancient devils. In the end, a great war broke out between these two foreign powers, while the ordinary people here obtained some cultivation methods as a result. As the ancient devils and ancient immortals died out, these cultivation methods were passed down. Before I came here, Green Lawn Academy had already existed. Moreover, this Green Lawn Academy is rumored to be related to the Green Lawn Palace inheritance. This Green Lawn Palace, during the era of the past ancient devils and immortals, was precisely one of the sects established by ordinary people. By now, there is already no one left who knows the exact whereabouts of Green Lawn Palace and the other sects, but it is still entirely possible that they still exist in places difficult to reach. The reason why I originally came to Green Lawn Academy was precisely to find the whereabouts of Green Lawn Palace. The reasoning behind why I wish to find the Green Lawn Palace hidden in a certain corner of this world is actually quite simple. Since I came to this world, possessing an ability we didn't have in the other world, then I wish to see all of this world's most magnificent, majestic, and mysterious places for myself. Moreover, Green Lawn Palace should have an even more formidable cultivation method that just might make me even stronger, perhaps allow me to touch upon things on an even deeper level, maybe even figure out just what kind of time-space this place is in. Later on, from the clues I obtained after searching for an extremely long time, I discovered this recorded Green Lawn Palace might very well be in the Heaven Ascension Mountain Range's frozen god domain. As for how great this frozen land is, no one knows for sure exactly. Fellow Otherworlder who I've never met, I don't know when you are reading these things I am writing. If over 180 years have passed, then I might have already died in this world. If the years haven't exceeded 180, then either something unexpected happened to me, or I am still surviving in a certain place in the frozen god domain behind Heaven Ascension Mountain Range, maybe even already inside the legendary Green Lawn Palace. If it is the latter, then perhaps we still have a chance to meet up and have a chat. What should I say to wrap this up? I think I won't say anything. If there is a chance for us to meet, then we can continue then. If I tell you about all of the interesting things in this world, then, my fellow Otherworlder, that would be taking away quite a bit of the fun. Lin she quietly read this monument, feeling as if he was watching a middle-aged physics professor mutter to himself. He wanted to continue listening to this middle-aged uncle's ramblings, but the Steele's familiar characters, following the middle-aged uncle's final line and a string of ellipses, came to a grunting stop. Nothing more to read. You idiot, you clearly knew how hard it was to find someone from the same homeland who could understand you, yet you couldn't just write a bit more, speak in a bit more detail. Lin she suddenly screamed at this Steele hysterically, sounding extremely wronged, just letting all of his feelings go. Meanwhile, from his eyes, tears began to tumble uncontrollably. Everyone was stupefied, all of them turning around to look at Lin Shi. He was clearly shouting at the monument, scolding Principal Zhang. In this world, there was actually someone who dared berate Principal Zhang. However, Lin Shi didn't feel any misgivings. Ever since he arrived in this world, he found that he could go back 10 halts, an ability that let him go back 10 minutes in time. As long as he thought about pushing that roulette-like green light, then he could return to 10 minutes before. Even though he could only use this once a day, after he arrived in this world, it indeed allowed him to never lose to anyone. That day, when that serious and stern young lady who seemed to be even a few years younger than himself came out of who knows where, continuously bombarding him with questions, he felt like this young lady was extremely special. Later on, he saw the bird nest fall from the timely wind and rain archway, so he used this ability to test out the young lady. In the end, that young lady seemed to be even more formidable than that elder. He didn't even see that young lady take action before he was smacked in the head. As a result, when he returned to when the young lady questioned him intensely, he only dared to obediently answer like a student facing a strict teacher. After this event, it also allowed a tourist like him to understand that in this world, there really were powerful individuals. However, at that time, he never would have predicted that the middle-aged uncle with the dog-like Qilin and Mandarin duck who single-handedly established Green One Academy's glory, the most dazzling and influential figure in the past half-century, actually came from the same place as himself. This person also knew what a television was, what a computer was, what the internet was. Moreover, this middle-aged uncle, he actually blue-balled him, actually not going more into details. Lin Shi, you, right when all of the lecturers' and professors' faces changed and they were about to speak up, Lin Shi wantonly berated out, idiot, and then shouted, return. In his head, the roulette-like green light the middle-aged uncle spoke about spun a circle, and then it became still in his head. His surroundings returned to the scene from 10 minutes before. He stood together with all of the new Green One Academy students, walking on a wooden path, traveling through an expanse of woods, passing over the giant bell tower made from golden mountain stones, heading towards the imposing three-colored glass garden palace. Lin Shi stood inside of this towering, majestic garden palace, standing before the characters left by that middle-aged uncle. He still couldn't completely control the emotions from an entirely different world, but this time, he didn't expose them, only looking at those incredibly familiar characters, quietly thinking to himself. Perhaps the forcible conversion of Green One Academy's halls into departments was not only a momentary whim, but also to leave behind more traces of the fact that he came to this world. Principal Zhang left Green One Academy a certain early morning 16 years ago, then, according to what was recorded on this inscription tablet, this middle-aged uncle who came from the same place as himself, making him momentarily feel no longer as lost and lonely, might still be alive. Right now, was he wandering within a certain snowy world? Since I came to this world, then I should properly see this different world for myself, properly continue living. Lin Shi's eyes stopped on the steel the middle-aged uncle left behind once more. He knew that in this world, there might not be anyone who understood this middle-aged uncle's inner world better than him. Since that is the case, then I need to first properly see your Green One Academy first. As he read over the words this middle-aged uncle left behind again and again, his mind that was trembling slowly became peaceful. Under the solemn and serious atmosphere, the middle-aged single-eyed lecturer concluded the tradition of Green One Academy's principle, coldly shouting, repeat after me in making this vow. I will not turn my back on the glory bestowed by this academy, I will not turn my back on my companion's trust, even if I have to give up my life to protect it. I will not turn my back on the glory bestowed by this academy, I will not turn my back on my companion's trust, even if I have to give up my life to protect it. All of the new students loudly repeated this line. Then, all of the lecturers and professors brought the new students out from this dignified garden palace. Self-Defense Department new students, follow me. Statecraft Department new students, follow me. Medicine Department new students, follow me. When all of the remaining lecturers and professors, including Vice Principal Xia and the black-haired man, Xia Yanbing, and the others left, only 6 black-robed lecturers remained. They walked down the wooden pathway, loudly shouting in a vacant area. What made the Self-Defense Department new students shiver inwardly was that the one calling for them to gather was precisely that fierce-looking, single-eyed lecturer. However, they obviously didn't dare ignore him, immediately bracing themselves and rushing over. The new students were separately brought to 6 different palace halls. The new students of Medicine and Spiritual Sacrifice Department were brought to 2 relatively lower valleys, while Natural Arts, Internal Study, Self-Defense, and Statecraft Department new students were separately brought to 4 different palace halls on overhanging cliffs. Self-Defense Department 7-layered Green Hall was the furthest one out. When they got closer, it was extremely terrifying, half of the base was directly exposed over the cliff. This palace hall's doors were made purely of bronze, the surface covered in dagger and arrow designs. At the sides of the entrance were 2 war drum-like decorations, laying on the war drums were 2 qilins. In the middle of the main entrance was a large brass ring that was polished to a shine. All of the new Self-Defense Department new students' eyes widened again. This traditional green-colored palace hall didn't seem all that massive, but the interior was far more complex than what any of them had imagined. That black-robed single-eyed lecturer pulled on the brass ring in the middle of the entrance, and then under dang noises, the inner machinery quickly pulled up this large and heavy door. A bronze stairway that was similarly filled with dagger and arrow designs moved through the air, stopping before their eyes. These bronze stairs led towards a winding corridor on the palace hall's first floor. The center of this green palace hall was completely empty. Chains suspended pieces of the bronze stairs in midair, winding corridors and rooms in the surroundings. However, these corridors and rooms were also irregular, making the inner space of this palace hall extremely complicated, cut like a giant labyrinth. Chapter Volume 122. Tradition, Zip Lines, and Voice Mask. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A black-robed woman suddenly walked out from a room without the slightest sound, giving Lin Shi and the other Self-Defense Department new students who had just followed the single-eyed lecturer onto the bronze stairs a fright. However, this tall and skinny woman was extremely friendly, her face carrying a kind smile, almost immediately making these apprehensive Self-Defense Department students release a breath of relief. This is Lecturer Mu Qing. In the future, your food and drink in this place will all be managed by her. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer nodded towards this tall and skinny woman, introducing her. Follow me. Mu Qing sized up the new students and then, after a friendly chuckle, turned around to lead the way. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer thus stopped talking, returning to the suspended bronze stairs. Following a loud noise, after his departure, the large bronze gates closed once more. Meanwhile, the suspended bronze stairs were collected like a drawbridge. There were more than 30 rooms along this corridor they were walking through alone, but this lecturer Mu Qing directly walked towards the end of this corridor. At the end of the corridor was a wall, on it many extravagant floral diagrams created from rarely seen, brilliantly colored shells. After giving this wall a push, it began to separate like a pair of doors. Behind this door were a set of inclined stairs, some ink and wash painting hanging from the walls on the side. Lin Shi looked at them with interest, only to find that what was drawn were all young men and women, some with long swords on their backs, some with longbows, some with huge axes that were as massive as their own bodies, making them look extremely heroic. These are your senior brothers and sisters. As long as you can break some records of the academy, apart from the additional course points awarded, once you leave this place, your portraits will also be hung here. Right at this time, Lecturer Mu Qing's voice sounded. At the same time, she pulled on a circular door handle on the wooden staircase handrail. Whoosh! A bronze staircase suspended in midair swept over again, connecting to the end of these wooden stairs, directly leading to the 5th floor. In the 5th floor's winding corridor, a crimson velvet curtain could be seen hanging at every interval. Covering the ground was a type of soft wood that released a faint fragrance, walking on it was extremely comfortable. This is the room for the 5 girls. Mu Qing pointed towards the 5 connected rooms in the middle of this corridor, speaking to the 5 Self-Defense Department female students. Then, she opened one of the doors. Almost all of the young men have some curiosity towards what the female rooms are like, so you all can come over and take a look right now. After today, you all won't have the chance anymore. Lecturer Mu Qing gave these new students who couldn't help but look inside a look, and then, after a chuckle, said, I will now tell all of you the first rule of Green One Academy. Everyone's rooms are forbidden areas, anyone who violates this rule will have up to 5 course points deducted. 5 points. All of the new students erupted into commotion. What if we want to chat with each other? A new student couldn't help but ask. This new student was precisely the Golden Spoon youngster Mu Shanzi who lost a bet to Lin Shi. Lecturer Mu Qing smiled and said, apart from all of your rooms and my private room, all other areas in this self-defense freshman dormitory are public spaces you all can use, with no lack of large lounges you can use. We can go anywhere we please outside of our private rooms. A Self-Defense Department new student cried out in surprise. Lecturer Mu Qing nodded. Adapting to and exploring a complex environment is one of Self-Defense Department's courses to begin with. Apart from your private rooms, none of the other rooms will be locked, you all may enter and exit them as you please. After a slight pause, under Lin Shi and the others' amazed eyes, she then added and said, "This is a rule set by Principal Zhang. This isn't only the case for our Self-Defense Department's freshman dormitory, in our entire Green One Academy, apart from those places that need a set amount of points to enter, the other places are all accessible as well. Our Green One Academy's various peaks can all be entered as you all please. We can go wherever we want in Green One Academy." Correct. However, I advise that before you all have enough skills and courage, to first take it easy. Each year, the number of new students who accidentally entered some places in our Green One Academy and became scared stupid is not just 1 or 2. Haha. Xiao Lu laughed loudly. However, this still rather young and tender young man who previously got into conflict with Lin Shi with their carriages discovered that he was the only one laughing. What? Don't tell me you all really feel that Ms. Mu Qing is serious. He couldn't help but gloomily ask those around him quietly. The Self-Defense Department students around him looked at him like they were looking at an idiot. Look at her, does she look like she's joking? Xiao Lu only gave Mu Qing a glance, and then he immediately shivered, his small face becoming slightly pale. Mu Qing's face seemed to be covered in a layer of cold light, not the slightest trace of amusement to be seen. Lin Shi was the first to walk into this female dorm out of curiosity. Everyone else already saw more than 10 years of this world, while he only saw 2 years or so worth, which was why everything was even more novel and interesting to him. Now that the rules of this academy permitted it, he naturally wouldn't show any politeness. Please. This is our room, so no matter what, you should let us go inside first, right? Hua Jiue curled her lips, leading the other 4 female Self-Defense Department students inside. She spoke like this, but her face didn't show that much dissatisfaction. Ah haha, Lin Shi laughed. This room wasn't that small, but there was no way it could fit more than 40 people, so the new students who were a step late could only remain outside. The floor of the room was also a green soft wood, inside of it a wooden canopy bed, to the side a yellow pear wood cupboard, and a desk. Unknown if it was due to the middle-aged uncle's ideas, the room also had a small separate space to wash up, as well as a small bathing pool built from bluestone. Apart from this, there were also some potted plants in the corner of the room. Sunlight and a cool breeze passed through the open wooden square window. Looking through it, the distant mountain range was hazy, forming a simple yet beautiful scene. Below the window was a cliff. Even though what rested below the cliff was an expanse of trees and meadows, the several hundred meters drop in elevation still made Lin Shi feel a bit dizzy. What are those things? Suddenly, Lin Shi was a bit shocked. He saw a silver-white light that flickered about between the mountaintops Green One Academy's magnificent and imposing palaces rested on. There were many places even on the mountaintop they were on that had this type of flashing silver-white light, cutting across the air. These were silver steel wires that connected these mountaintops valleys. Those are silver wire zip lines. Lin Shi suddenly turned around, discovering that the black-robed lecturer Mu Qing had unknowingly already stood behind him. Now, I will announce Green One Academy's second rule: we will not stop private battles between new students, Hong. Her voice was suddenly cut off by a great uproar. Even Lin Shi's face was covered in shock. This Green One Academy allowed fighting as the students pleased. Did this still count as a rule? There is no mistake, only, I am not finished. You all lack enough cool-headedness and calmness. Mu Qing gave all of these Self-Defense Department new students a de-emphasized look. Our Green One Academy's second rule is indeed that we won't prevent fights between new students, but they must be carried out in the set valleys. If private fights are conducted outside of those valleys, the lightest punishment will be a deduction of 10 points, while a more severe punishment would be direct expulsion from Green One Academy. 10 points. Expulsion. SSSSS. The sound of cold air being sucked between clenched teeth rang between this room. If we wish to enter those valleys, do we directly slide down from those zip lines? Lin Shi immediately recalled that in the world he and the middle-aged uncle came from, there were some foreign universities that had shuttles running between their buildings. He ignored the 10-point deduction and expulsion punishment, instead asking in a somewhat calm manner, were these also done by Principal Zhang? Mu Qing nodded in praise. This was indeed Principal Zhang's idea, able to save us a lot of time. Then can we enter those valleys for personal conflicts at any time? Xiao Lu and Mu Shanzi both looked towards Lin Shi with malicious intentions, asking. Mu Qing waved her hand, stopping the self-defense department new students who were trying to squeeze their way in, explaining, outside of times where there are lessons planned, you all can enter those valleys at any time. Moreover, the various departments all have minimum entrance quotas. For self-defense department students, each person must exchange pointers with others at least 6 times each month. The reason why our Green One Academy's self-defense department students usually all possess great fighting strength when they are sent out is precisely because of this special tradition of our Green One Academy. After a pause, this middle-aged black-robed woman who seemed to understand human nature quite well seemed to have seen through Qiu Lu and Mu Shanzi's intentions. Moreover, our self-defense department only has a rule of not deducting points if one meets the participation quota. There is no upper limit. This means that if you want to fight others every single day in that place, that is also fine, only, all students who enter have to wear the designated clothing and voice-changing masks. Moreover, the terrain inside mimics various border army battlefields, extremely complex. Once you enter, you might not necessarily be able to encounter the opponent you wish to fight. Ultimately, even though this is a rather interesting and stimulating process, it is not a place to vent your personal spite. It's like that. Mu Shanzi was full of disappointment, shooting Lin Shi a hateful look. Then we can't even shout out our identity and challenge the other party inside, have the arranged opponent come to fight. Mu Qing nodded her head in a meaningful manner. This is obviously fine, but this is on the premise that your opponent is willing to accept your challenge. Moreover, you have to ensure that you don't have any grudges with others. It is because in the history of Green One Academy, there has been more than one instance where after someone loudly shouted their name, they were viciously beaten by more than 10 students. I reckon that for someone who is as handsome as myself, and so amiable, there shouldn't be any issues with others plotting against me. Mu Shanzi said to himself in an extremely self-satisfied manner. Pooh! Hua Jiue and the others immediately couldn't help but burst out laughing. Ms. Mu, then once we enter, are we going to be facing our senior brothers and sisters too? Wouldn't us new students end up being beaten miserably? Someone couldn't help but ask this. The new students have their designated new student valley that other students cannot enter. However, there is no restriction on you new students from entering these older students' valleys. Moreover, in all of these valleys, the use of soul force is restricted, so if you all have the courage and interest, you all can also go in and challenge some of your senior brothers and sisters. If you are able to accumulate 3 wins, then that is equivalent to half a course point of reward. Look, there are people there. Right at this time, the new students who were next to the window cried out in alarm. Lin Shi immediately looked over, only seeing figures slide down the silvery white zip lines from a few mountaintops, quickly descending like young swallows returning to the forest, disappearing into the valley below. 41 new students in Self-Defense Department C.18. Chapter Volume 123. Not a place people should be in. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. They're people from medicine and natural arts departments. Their normal curriculum is usually studied indoors, which is why they are in more of a rush to head to those valleys. Lecturer Mu Qing stood next to the window, a slight smile on her face. Her facial features were extremely ordinary, but all of these black-robed academy lecturers had an unrestrained and aloof feeling to them. When she spoke, a light breeze swept past her black robes, making her entire being seem like a single black Japanese rose on a cliff. Alright, all of the male students should withdraw from this room. When you all settle down in your own rooms, you'll have more than enough chances to see these things. When Lin Shi and all of the young men withdrew from this room, she gave the 5 self-defense department female students tallest Hua Jiue a look and said, "Seems like your personality is the most straightforward, so I'll leave this room to you. You won't feel any dissatisfaction, right?" Hua Jiue shrugged her shoulders in indifference. "This is the key to the room." Mu Qing produced a clanking metal ring from her sleeves, many bronze keys hanging from it, every key a 3-inch long and narrow bronze piece. However, the decorative motifs on them were all different. The one she gave Hua Jiue was one with an owl-shaped design. Meanwhile, the designs of the other female students' keys were respectively a northern goshawk, vine, skylark, and brambles. For the sake of being impartial, you all can either choose to return to your rooms, or you can come with me to look at the men's rooms. How can we miss this opportunity? Of course we have to go. After another pull on this corridor's brass ring, a flight of bronze stairs shifted over, connecting them to a corner of the 3rd floor. None of the 3rd floor rooms were locked. Mu Qing randomly pushed open a room. This time, the new students who were previously left outside because they were too reserved were the first to rush into this room. This room was also on the cliff side, the scenery that was revealed through the window almost completely identical. However, the interior was completely different. From the ground to the walls, even the bed and couch were made of sturdy and heavy limestone mountain rock. These limestone rock furniture all had some criss-crossed marks on them, only the mattress and bedding made of thick beast skin, making them look a bit softer. You were in the biggest rush to enter, the one with the least patience. All of you are going to be given a room anyway, there's no reason to be this rushed at all, so this room is yours. Qiu Lu's excited expression immediately became rigid, because he was the first one to rush into this room. Because they were shoving each other to get inside first, this room naturally became a bit more messy. The greatest meaning behind each room doesn't lie in the rooms themselves, but rather in the people who have walked out of them. Mu Qing handed a key with an owl design to the somewhat sullen Qiu Lu, and then calmly said, "Using this room as an example, there has been a high general and 2 provincial supervisors." Hong. Another commotion immediately erupted. Qiu Lu's eyes also brightened, saying excitedly, "Perhaps from today forth, another great general will walk out of this room." "Idiot!" someone said quietly, shooting him a look. "Who said that? Stand out here." Qiu Lu was so angry his entire face flushed red. However, he didn't see who it was that spoke. "Alright, each person gets a key, and then you all can go find your respective rooms. The doors all have matching designs with the keys. Teacher Mu, what are we doing after this? If you haven't learned to always hide some things to eat on your way here yet and are hungry, then you can look around this self-defense freshman dormitory. One of the rooms will have things to eat. Otherwise, just stay in your rooms. When it comes time for morning classes, I will naturally bring you all over. However, you all must remember Green Luan Academy's first rule," Mu Qing said in a gentle manner. "Otherwise, as the first one to violate it, I will deduct 1 point from you all. This rule is a bit strange. Why does it exist?" A golden spoon curled his mouth. "This is a question you can ask Professor Situ, who will be lecturing you all tomorrow. His reply will definitely leave you all with a deeper impression than I can. Girls, we can go. Also, from now on, if you enter someone else's room, a point will be deducted." Mu Qing adjusted her hair a bit, chuckled, and then apart from Qiu Lu, the other new students were all made to leave. She then led the 5 self-defense department female students in turning around and leaving. Lin Shi gave the key. He was given a look, about to look for his own room. The design on his key was a fluttering black flag that looked like a dark cloud. However, as soon as he raised his head, he saw a deathly pale Li Kaiyun, even his legs shaking. What's wrong? Lin Shi asked in confusion. Li Kaiyun's hands were holding his chest, as if he was truly frightened badly. He whispered by Lin Shi's ears, "Did you notice? Teacher Mu's footsteps don't make any noise at all. Her feet don't even seem to need to touch the ground." Lin Shi stared blankly for a moment, and then he turned around. The tall and slender Mu Qing was currently walking on the suspended bronze stairs, the spacious academy black robes preventing him from seeing her legs, but he indeed couldn't hear the slightest footstep sound. His brows furrowed, and then he turned around to look at Li Kaiyun, because he was sure Li Kaiyun had more things to say. Otherwise, just this bit alone wouldn't make the hot-blooded and loyal Li Kaiyun become like this. Li Kaiyun finally gasped for breath, but his complexion was still deathly pale. The inside of her robes is extremely terrifying. Just now, I think I even saw something like a snake head sticking out. Lin Shi was startled. Something like a snake head. Yeah, about this size, and I'm sure it was alive, because it immediately pulled back. Li Kaiyun made a fist to show the size, indicating that the snake was at least the size of a fist. Suddenly, Li Kaiyun couldn't speak anymore, his face becoming even more pale. It was because right at this moment, lecturer Mu Qing, on that suspended bronze stairs, suddenly turned around and gave him a look, seemingly even giving him and Lin Shi a malicious chuckle. Creak. After sending the 5 self-defense department female students to the 5th floor, she pushed open a wall, and then walked inside. It was unknown where she disappeared to inside this labyrinth-like building. Lin Shi, you think she heard what we said? Huh? Don't tell me you aren't scared. Li Kaiyun gave Lin Shi a strange look. He didn't see any fear from Lin Shi's face. Lin Shi laughed, and then he patted Li Kaiyun's shoulder. What is there to be scared of? She is a lecturer of this academy, as well as someone who watches over this freshman dormitory. The more terrifying she is, the less of a chance of anyone harming us. Li Kaiyun stared blankly. Your words seem to really make sense. Then in a bit, should we explore this freshman dormitory a bit? Lin Shi immediately shook his head. We'll have more than enough time in the future. Who knows what kind of torment we'll have to go through for our first class in Green One Academy. Heaven's choice. However, aptitude is only 2, yet Professor Qin still wanted him into the self-defense department, and in the end, he really did enter this department. For him, I wonder if this is a blessing or misfortune. When the wall turned just now, the black-robed Mu Qing stood there without moving, her ears moving slightly, muttering this to herself. Lin Shi had no idea that the black-robed lecturer behind that wall was still contemplating the issue of his future prospects, currently holding that key while looking for his own room. As he moved along this 3rd-floor corridor, people continuously pushed open doors and entered, which was why Lin Shi didn't have to waste time examining the doors' designs one by one. After walking all the way down this corridor, only after reaching the second-to-last room did Lin Shi see a door no one pushed open with a black flag that seemed to be facing fierce winds. Right at this time, a skinny and tall youngster who had a long blade and a bow on his back walked towards him. There were originally 4 border barbarians who had long blades on their backs, but in the end, there was only one who carried his long blade into Green One Academy. This was why it was rather easy for Lin Shi to remember this rather quiet but unyielding youngster's name. Tang Ku. Tang Ku, seems like we're neighbors. Lin Shi looked at the diagram on the door of the room beside his with curiosity, a heavy piece of armor. Tang Ku froze for a moment. Golden spoons, border barbarians and bumpkins didn't really get along with each other to begin with, which was why he didn't expect Lin Shi, who entered via Heaven's Choice, would actually take the initiative to introduce himself. Yes. When he saw the armor diagram on the door next to Lin Shi's room, he nodded in a bit of an uncomfortable manner. Lin Shi laughed and said, Tang Ku, do you mind if we chat with each other a bit? We can do it now, or we can wait until you drop off your stuff. Tang Ku entered another momentary stupor. He lowered his head, his eyes perfectly lining up with his own dirt-covered, worn-out cloth shoes. Chat with me, why? Why? Lin Shi gave this habitually silent and rather uncomfortable tall and skinny young man a look, becoming a bit stunned. Then, immediately afterwards, he chuckled and said, because I admire you. Lin Shi's smile was extremely pure, his tone also extremely easygoing, but Tang Ke's entire body went rigid without any reason. I have no interest in fun with sun and dragon. Fun with sun and dragon. Lin Shi looked strangely at Tang Ke, asking with curiosity, what is that? The expression on Tang Ke's face became even more embarrassed. It is, playing with butts, I don't like that stuff. Lin Shi was completely dumbstruck, truly stunned. Then, he couldn't help but roar with laughter, laughing so hard his waist was bending over. However, when he straightened his body again, he looked at Tang Ke seriously and with pity, nodding towards the long blade and bow on his back. When I said I admire you, it was just because even if you couldn't hold on, you still wanted to bring those things here on your back. When I said I wanted to chat with you, it was just to hear about some things from the border army. I naturally don't like that stuff either. Tang Ke's dark and skinny face immediately flushed completely red. Lin Shi rubbed his stomach that was starting to hurt from laughing, but he still managed to hold himself back. I came from Deerwood Town. The Uncle Lu who drove me here was also an old border army soldier. He didn't tell me anything about the border army, but whenever the border army is mentioned, they always make it sound like some extremely dangerous place. For my words just now to even make you think that kind of stuff, this border army, just what kind of place is it exactly? The border army. Tang Ke took a deep breath. Even though he could tell that Lin Shi's expression was extremely sincere, he still subconsciously stroked the blade on his back. The border army is not a place people should be in. 1. Old term for homosexuality. Chapter Volume 124. Ideal of Youth. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Tang Ke wasn't that hard to get along with. After dropping off all of his stuff inside his room, he walked back out, sitting on the ground and starting to chat. Do you really know absolutely nothing about our Yunqin Empire military's organization structure? Lin Shi was curious as to just what kind of place the border was, while Tang Ke was stunned at just how little Lin Shi knew. Everyone else thinks that just because I was a Heaven's Choice candidate that I ought to know a lot, but honestly speaking, I don't even know how I was recommended here. My father is nothing more than a normal merchant with a few stores. Lin Shi rubbed his own legs that were still a bit sore and said, that's why forget about the military's organization structure. I don't even know what ranks are higher and what ranks are lower. My knowledge only goes as far as knowing that the highest commanding officer of a town is called town supervisor, and then higher than that are the city supervisor and a provincial supervisor, that's it. Apart from the military's organization structure, all I know is that it is divided into 8 sectors. Tang Ke also began to rub his calves like Lin Shi, trying to relax himself as well. Not having the long blade on his back left him feeling a bit uncomfortable, making him inadvertently overcautious. Our Yunqin Empire's military is divided into 3 great branches: Central Continent Defense, Local Army, and Border Army. This tall and skinny youngster whose posture was a bit stooped organized his thoughts while correcting a mistake Lin Shi made. Strictly speaking, the Border Army refers to the stationing of troops around the Empire's borders for defense, and not any specific place. Lin Shi nodded, indicating that he understood what he was being told. Tang Ke began to mutter to himself, saying, our Yunqin Empire is founded on military might, the importance attached to the army the greatest. The Central Continent defense troops are under the direct jurisdiction of the Emperor, while the local armies and border armies are essentially the same, just their locations being different. Is it because of the places the border armies are stationed that makes it so dangerous, different from the local armies? Correct. Tang Ke looked at Lin Shi, and then asked a question in response. Do you know why we border barbarians usually do not keep our hair long, and most of us have rather stooped bodies? Lin Shi looked calmly into Tang Ke's eyes, shaking his head and saying, I am actually quite curious, but I am unable to think of the reason. Tang Ku quietly said, "It is because having long hair makes it more inconvenient to move, it might get caught in things or make noises. As for why most of our postures are rather stooped, a portion of it is because we had to shoulder tasks that don't match our age. This is a natural part of life in the border armies, but the other part of the reason is because it has become a habit of the border army. It is because the more one curls up one's body, the less likely it is to be shot by a sudden vicious arrow. The casualty count in the border armies has always been extremely great, which is why apart from the regular army soldiers that are dispatched each year, there are also large amounts of refugees and prisoners who become border soldiers. If a refugee wants to attain merit, Yunqin Empire's laws and decrees dictate that military contributions can be used as amends." Lin Shi frowned. "Then that is to say, our Yunqin Empire's state of affairs isn't as calm as how I see it. Our Yunqin Empire has 3 great border armies: Jadefall Border Army, Thousand Sunset Border Army, and Dragon Snake Border Army." Tang Ku looked at Lin Shi, quietly explaining, 50 years ago, Principal Zhang took the heads of 30 Shi generals in a single night, forcing back Shi's 15 divisions all the way west of Jadefall City. However, during these 50 years, Shi's tribes have completely become bandits. Each year, around fall and winter time, there would always be large numbers of bandits crossing over into Jadefall City. In addition, because the territory west of the areas these bandits occupy belongs to Tangshan country, some soldiers and experts from Tangshan country are starting to appear around Jadefall City, fighting Jadefall City's border army, resulting in casualties on both sides. However, both sides are apprehensive of the other side's country's strength, so neither side is willing to completely become hostile, everyone simply exhausting each other's forces. Dragon Snake Border Army's side manages everything east of Dragon Snake Mountain Range, along with the inside of Desolate Pond region with many uncivilized cave barbarians. As for the Thousand Sunset Border Army, it is the result of Principal Zhang and Vice Principal Xia, their group's efforts in Meteor Lake. After Nanmo country's forces were slaughtered until they were forced back, they now occupy the Thousand Sunset Mountain that previously belonged to Nanmo country. After that battle, Nanmo country underwent a huge transformation, now becoming Great Mang Dynasty. In the past decade, Dragon Snake Border Army has been stationed around Blackwater Pool, but they had already fought many times with the Great Mang Dynasty. Then that means that the west, south, and east all have some dangers. Then what about the north here? When he heard Tang Ku talk about Dragon Snake Border Army, Lin Shi's brows furrowed a bit tighter, because his own Deerwood town was not that far from Dragon Snake Mountain Range. The northern side is practically a world of ice and snow. Moreover, with Heaven Ascension Mountain Range which not even soldiers could scale in the way, as well as Green Lawn Academy guarding it, there isn't much to worry about. However, the situations from the remaining 3 sides have still exhausted most of Yunqin Empire's manpower, while the dangerous environments of Dragon Snake Mountain and the other places prevents our Yunqin Empire's border armies from dealing with the issues more efficiently. Thus, we are unable to completely clean up those bandits outside Shi and the cave barbarians outside Dragon Snake Mountain Range. They are like the grass of the plains, when one batch is cut, another will grow. During these past few years, our Yunqin Empire looked extremely rich and powerful on the outside, full of peace and prosperity, but the reality is that we are being nibbled away at from 3 directions. Just looking at it from the supplies the border armies receive now compared to a decade ago, it is easy to see how embarrassing our Yunqin Empire's current state is. This means that my Deerwood town's peace is built on the blood-soaked guarding of those border soldiers, refugees, and prisoners. Lin Shi said while looking at Tang Ku with admiration. I didn't expect you to know so much, have such insights. Tang Ku's face became a bit dejected, shaking his head. With my age, how could I possibly have learned so much myself? Without personally experiencing it, how can I dare claim to comment on any differences between the supplies given to the border army now and what was given more than 10 years ago? Lin Shi turned around and gave Tang Ku's door a look. For some reason, he suddenly thought of that black-sheathed long blade and the longbow. These were all things my big brother told me, his name Lu Wuyue, from a small academy that wasn't that well known. He taught me many things. Without him, I might not have survived, let alone reach this place. Tang Ku stared at his worn boots, slowly saying. Lin Shi nodded, asking, which border army did you come from? Jadefall Border Army, stationed in the earthen outskirts Heaven's Lens Lake. At your age, how did you end up in a place like that? Lin Shi looked at Tang Ku, speaking gently, of course, if you don't want to answer this question of mine, it's not a problem at all. Tang Ku shook his head slightly. There isn't much to hide. In every border city, there will be some personnel who follow the soldiers. My father was a food supplier specialized in preparing rations, while my mother was a tailor who specialized in armor repair. They both died in a nighttime bandit assault, and thus, I naturally became a member of the Jadefall Border Army. Lin Shi looked at Tang Ku quietly for a moment, and then suddenly said, obtaining the recommendation to join Green One Academy's entrance examination in the Border Army definitely wasn't easy for you. This question came extremely abruptly, but these two youngsters who were sitting on the ground, hugging their knees, both seemed to be able to sense the other side's thoughts and emotions. Tang Ku also nodded his head seriously, the expression in his eyes a bit vacant as he looked at the door of his own room. There were 2 times where I was the sole survivor out of my squad. The first time I only fainted when I got hit by the arrow, the second was because of my big brother. Originally, the one who should have survived was him, but in the end, it was me who lived instead. There is a saying in my Jadefall Border Army, being the only one to survive once isn't much, but being the only one to survive twice means that one's life is too tenacious, a demon personifying pestilence. When others are together with me, they will easily lose their lives, so they used the Eastern Outskirts recommendation qualification to send me over. No wonder you had to keep his blade and bow. Lin Shi couldn't hold himself back, patting Tang Ku's shoulder, momentarily also becoming quiet. Tang Ku stretched out his legs, his back leaning into the corridor railings. He discovered that as he sat on the winding corridor's ground with Lin Shi, his mood became unprecedentedly calm, as if Lin Shi's body had a strange formless type of comforting power, able to make one temporarily unload the pressure they were shouldering. He turned around and looked into Lin Shi's eyes, seeing only a great clearness that lacked all selfish motives. I originally thought that you wanted to chat with me because you wanted to ask me things related to cultivation. Tang Ku felt an indescribable feeling inside of him. After some slight hesitation, he said this. Lin Shi shook his head and chuckled, I am actually not in that much of a rush on this matter. Since we already entered this academy, the academy will naturally teach me. The stuff the academy knows about cultivation should be much more formidable and accurate than what you know. You really are a bit peculiar, no wonder you could enter Heaven's Choice. Tang Ku couldn't help but laugh. We've been talking about me all this time, what about you? You really didn't even know how you were recommended, brought here just like that. Whether you believe me or not, I believe it. Lin Shi naturally spoke a line of nonsense, and then said in a somewhat distressed manner, I was originally perfectly happy in Deerwood Town, but one day, a girl who was even a year or 2 younger than me suddenly appeared out of nowhere, asked me a ton of questions. Soon afterwards, a carriage came with the city supervisor's orders that I had to participate in the great entrance examination. Tang Ku's brows furrowed. Then it should be some great figure who took interest in you, or else if it was just a city supervisor, even if he had recommendation authority, he would still leave it for his own children. Lin Shi laughed and said, the Uncle Lu who drove me here told me that for nobodies like us, we should just stop wasting time thinking about things we won't be able to understand. Tang Ku also laughed. Just like that, the 2 youngsters smiled while sitting on the corridor floor. Only after remaining quiet for a bit, did Lin Shi nudge Tang Ku's arm. Since you're already an academy student now, what kind of plans do you have going forward? You still plan on going back to the border army, try to collect achievements? Tang Ku shook his head firmly. I won't, I promised my brother to properly continue living. I originally wanted to enter statecraft department, because when my brother was still alive, he always felt like the blades and arrows of internal governing would always carry more significance than those of the border army. Since I entered self-defense, if I can graduate from the academy, I will most likely choose to start from a town supervisor position. What about you, Lin Shi? Tang Ku turned around to look at Lin Shi, asking, what plans do you have? I didn't really think all that far. If you really force me to make a choice right now, Lin Shi frowned, and then said, I want to take a look at what lies on the other side of Heaven Ascension Mountain Range. Chapter Volume 125. The blood that flows around the carriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Everything Lin Shi said was the truth, extremely sincere, while Tang Ku was also extremely frank. If it was anyone else, at the very least, they wouldn't tell Lin Shi that there were casualties every single day in the Thousand Sunset Border Army. It was because in the song sung about Principal Zhang that was circulated throughout the outside world, after the Battle of Meteor City, Nanmo country didn't dare do a thing in the past half-century. Of course, this wasn't entirely false, because after that battle of the past, the Nanmo country that was defeated was later destroyed from internal strife. The ruling regime completely changed, now becoming the Great Mang dynasty. For more than a decade, the One's Dragon Snake Border Army fought endlessly with weren't the past domineering Nanmo country's Heaven Cavalry, but rather Great Mang dynasty's Ghost Rider Army. However, as for the actual differences, anyone with a normal brain naturally understood clearly. When these topics were mentioned, bits and pieces were exposed, naturally also possessing a bit of disrespectful feeling towards Principal Zhang. It was precisely because both of them were extremely honest and direct that Lin Shi and Tang Ku were able to chat so happily. However, Tang Ku still found it hard to understand why Lin Shi wanted to scale Heaven Ascension Mountain Range, enter that barren world of ice and snow. Lin Shi couldn't tell him that both him and that middle-aged uncle came from an entirely different world, that the words on that monument were simplified Chinese characters he could understand. If he did, Tang Ku would definitely think that he was speaking words that couldn't be any more nonsense. Because of the difficult trudging they went through to get here, Lin Shi and the other self-defense department new students all learned to hide enough rations on them to last a few days. Together with the fact that he didn't have any thoughts of hastily exploring this place's mysteries, after chatting away the remaining afternoon hours, Lin Shi slept peacefully in his own room during this first night in the self-defense freshman dormitory. This room was even more quiet than the one in Deerwood Town, the fresh air that seeped through the wooden-framed window allowing him to sleep extremely soundly. In the distance, there was a shabby-looking carriage that stopped on a hill. The two old horses' restraints were undone, allowed to roam about the edge of the forest, their heads currently lowered, slowly chewing on the moist grass shoots on the ground. Next to the carriage was an open fire. The attention of Uncle Lu, who brought Lin Shi through half of Yunqin Empire to Summer Spirit Lake, was currently concentrated on a cut-open hare. The hare was already roasted until it was golden yellow. After evenly scattering a layer of snow-white salt on its surface, the elder tore off a leg, starting to chew on it in his mouth, a hint of satisfaction spreading across his face. Suddenly, his body curled up slightly, figure becoming even more stooped. A bit of noise was released from the jungle. An arrow shot out as fast as lightning, passing over the top of his head, stabbing fiercely into the carriage behind him. After an extremely oppressive thunk noise, the thick and sturdy carriage body was almost penetrated through, only the feathers at the end shaking endlessly. However, even after suffering from this type of sudden assault, the expression on this elder's face still didn't show any distinct changes. He merely lowered the fully roasted hare and half-eaten leg onto a wooden plank next to the bonfire, and then his stooped body stood up. Pa pa pa. A burst of applause sounded. 5 assassins dressed in black clothes walked out from the forest. The middle-aged male in the lead was the one who was clapping. He had a pale complexion, his beard rather long, a long sword resting diagonally on his back, giving off a rather refined appearance. However, the old driver wasn't looking at him, instead giving the tall and sturdy man at his side a look, saying coldly, "So it's you. The tall and sturdy man's face looked like it had been stomped on, the bridge of his nose caved in a strange manner, making his current smile indescribably strange and sinister. What, after knocking me down in front of the Academy's entrance examination like that, did you think that you could leave calmly just like that? All this just for that one fist. The elder's posture became even more stooped, but a bit of a sneer appeared on his face. The refined-looking middle-aged man said with a light sigh, that fist was not only aimed at his face, it was also aimed at Pine Academy's face. Pine Academy is low-class academy to begin with. Even if your faces were stepped on, no one would really notice. This truly is stupid. The ice-cold voice from the elder's throat and the clear mockery made this middle-aged man couldn't help but freeze up a bit. However, he still bowed towards this elder. Since that is the case, then please excuse this later generation. Following this bow, a space enough for an arrow to fly across was cleared up between the trees. He walked out of the group and towards the elder. Shio! An arrow immediately shot from behind this middle-aged man, directly aiming at the space between the elder's brows. At the same time, the middle-aged man's right hand was raised slightly. The long sword, because of his bowed waist, automatically slid out, the sword hilt entering his hand. These 5 individuals weren't the only ones here. Within the trees, there was an archer whose arrows were extremely accurate even in the darkness of night. The middle-aged man and the archer were well coordinated, several inches of dazzling sword radiance shining, clearly about to spill outwards. Pooh! Right at this time, the slight sound of flesh being penetrated sounded. The middle-aged man's body shook intensely, his right hand suddenly stopped, as if forcibly held in place by an invisible force. His rather graceful attack came to a rigid stop. Dang! Meanwhile, the elder's body suddenly shot straight up like a bent bamboo pole, springing out ferociously. Following a turn of his wrist, an ordinary dagger hacked out viciously, intercepting the tip of the arrow with incomparable precision, drawing forth a string of fine sparks, deflecting this shockingly powerful arrow. That robust crushed-nose man had just leapt out from the side with an evil grin, a thin and sharp long blade in hand, but he immediately looked towards his own chest with an expression of disbelief. A string of blood was currently shooting out from his body, the end of an arrow still shaking. Shio! Right now, the second arrow had just left the woods, while the middle-aged man's entire body was backing up in panic. On the back of his right hand, there was actually also earthworm-like blood wriggling about. Pine! A cold-faced, black-clothed assassin immediately blocked in front of the middle-aged man, his hands swept towards the elder together with his sleeves. At the same time, another individual stabbed his pike fiercely towards the elder's waist, the entire silvery-white pike instantly covered in a layer of gleaming green light. This wasn't only a 2-member joint attack, but rather 3 opponents that were attacking together, because at this time, the second arrow also already flew over from within the forest. Moreover, the 3 assassins were extremely well coordinated, even more terrifying than extremely fierce and nasty bandits. However, under this type of situation, the elder's expression still didn't show too many changes. A layer of green light also appeared on the surface of his body. As the countless black lights and pike stabbed at his body, the dagger in his hands deflected another arrow. Pa! The assassin currently flanking from another side raised his iron shield, blocking this arrow. However, the moment the arrow smashed into the iron shield, the elder's stooped figure suddenly shot up with terrifying momentum, directly head-butting the cold-faced black-clothed assassin. That black-clothed assassin released a miserable scream, as if his body was struck by a moving tree, sent flying backwards. 2 fine and long daggers fell from the elder's body. The pike-wielding assassin's feet entered the fight, but his face was full of horror. There was a part of the elder's clothes that were rippled, but his body didn't have any injuries. Scarlet plate armor. When he saw a unique scarlet-red color within the opening of his outer clothing, the middle-aged man whose expression had already changed greatly released a cry of disbelief. You are the Black Flag armies, originally, I was still willing to let you all off with your lives, but you recognized my identity. You cannot blame this on me anymore. The elder's pale yellow eyes that carried a bit of mockery now suddenly became ice-cold. The instant the first word was uttered, his feet were already crushing down on the head of the black-clothed assassin who was previously sent flying. The black-clothed assassin who was previously sent flying immediately became a corpse. Meanwhile, the elder was like a galloping horse treading on a flying swallow, rising up. The dagger in his hands easily blocked the refined-looking middle-aged man's long sword, while his other hand ruthlessly crushed the refined-looking middle-aged man's throat. Incapable of even chi distribution, yet you all still dare cut in line in Four Seasons Plains. Low-class academies are low-class after all. From the perspective of that robust, crushed-nosed man who was already sitting powerlessly on the ground, he only felt his hands suddenly become lighter, the long blade already in the elder's hand. Then, his body gradually became cold, everything before his eyes also completely darkening. What he was unable to see, was that the pike-wielding and shield-bearing assassins had their heads removed the instant they faced the elder. Then, this elder rushed into the forest with unimaginable nimbleness. A moment later, a miserable howl sounded from the forest. The blood-soaked elder walked out from the forest slowly. After fetching a clean set of clothes from the shabby carriage, he then sat down by the open fire, completely disregarding the bloodiness all around him and slowly raising the still warm rabbit meat. Dang, dang, dang! When the first strand of sunlight passed through the half-covered window, Lin Shi was woken up by an indistinct, clear and melodious bell sound. Self-defense freshman dormitory's third-floor corridor immediately became as noisy as a marketplace. Each new student, including Lin Shi, when they opened their own doors, found that there were 2 sets of blue clothes waiting for them, as well as 2 pairs of brand-new ordinary black cloth shoes. The blue clothes' collars and cuffs had small swords embroidered on them. Within 5 minutes, change into the academy's clothes. Your first official class will soon begin. The black-robed lecturer Mu Qing examined these new students from a segment of bronze stairs that suddenly rose. Time to attend class, Lin Shi shook his head, getting those familiar memories out of his brain, and then picked up the blue academy uniform waiting at the doorway. Chapter Volume 126. First lesson. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Under the cool morning breeze, lecturer Mu Qing led all of the new self-defense department students out of the freshman dormitory. After today, I won't be picking you all up and dropping you off anymore. You all will have to enter and exit the freshman dormitory on your own. Behind her, one could vaguely make out the green multi-layered hall with the suspended bronze stairs and lofty walls, the building like a slumbering beast. Lin Shi, who was just like that middle-aged uncle, feeling like he might as well sit back and enjoy the process, properly examine this brilliant world, was shocked once again. Several immortal cranes whose colors were distinctively black and white passed over the green building, together with the black-robed woman below. They formed a scene that would have been difficult to see in his past world. Our teacher for the first lesson is him. Li Kaiyun, who was walking next to Lin Shi, didn't share his attitude of appreciation. The moment that figure appeared from behind a black-tiled palace hall without any omen, he, together with many other self-defense department new students, immediately didn't dare move. The figure walking towards them was precisely that cold, single-eyed lecturer. Lin Shi, however, didn't feel that this single-eyed lecturer was all that scary. This single-eyed lecturer's face gave off a similar feeling as Professor Snape's, but he was 10 or so years older. Contrary to Lin Shi, there were some new self-defense department students whose faces were exceptionally pale, their steps shaky, who drew his attention. What's wrong with them? Lin Shi asked Li Kaiyun quietly, his voice full of curiosity. They were trapped in some corridors for an entire night, only in the morning were they brought out by lecturer Mu Qing. The one who replied to Lin Shi's question was Hua Jiyue, this tall girl from North Sprout Province who was looking at Lin Shi with an expression full of interest. There were many people who were trapped inside the dorm yesterday, just that most of them weren't as lucky as them, unable to find a way out. What, you actually didn't run all around the dorm? Lin Shi laughed and said, what, do I look like the type who loves to run all over the place? Don't forget that you were the first to rush into my room. Hua Jiue completely ignored the ambiguous meanings of this line. She shot Lin Shi a look and said, the expression in your eyes when you look at anything is filled with fascination. Is this why you were able to deal with that medicine department professor's strange prompt? Lin Shi's smile became even more brilliant. Let's say that you're correct. However, I'm not in that much of a hurry either. If I want to see interesting things, I can also wait until others tell me what types of things are worth seeing, and then go see those things then. That is why last night, I indeed didn't run all over the place. Hua Jiue gave Lin Shi another glance, quietly saying, last night, there were two fellas who discovered that the freshman dormitory was far larger than what we imagined. It isn't only limited to the building we live in, there is also a passage into the belly of the mountain. Who knows just how large the world below the dorm is, what kind of things are there? Then once you find out, you definitely have to tell me. You. Hua Jiue almost choked to death after hearing Lin Shi's words. I'm joking, you don't need to take me so seriously. Lin Shi laughed with a bitter smile. If there are any courses we have to take later where it's fine even if we are trapped for an entire night, then we can explore as we please. Didn't lecturer Mu Qin tell us that apart from those places one can only enter after acquiring a set amount of academic points, all of Green One Academy is accessible. The places that need to be explored are definitely many. Hong. Right at this time, the Self-Defense Department students around Lin Shi and the others all erupted into commotion. Lin Shi turned his head in surprise, seeing that almost all of the Golden Spoon new students were staring at the chest of the single-eyed black-robed lecturer who was walking over. There were two emblems on his chest, one in the shape of a shield, golden in color, covered in thistle patterns, the other silver-colored, in the design of a falling star. Thistle's emblem and meteor emblem. Li Kaiyun was as confused as Lin Shi at first, but when he clearly saw these two emblems' designs, his expression changed greatly, from the initial reverence to admiration and shock. The two emblems were exceptionally striking on the black robes, because what they reflected was inextinguishable glory. Only those who have participated in two or more dangerous assassinations or rescues have a chance of being gifted this thistle's emblem, while only those who have displayed exceptional valor in battle have a chance of being awarded the meteor emblem. These are symbols of unmatched glory and honor in the empire. In the entire empire, it is rumored that only 20 or so of these emblems are awarded each year. When he saw Lin Shi's face that was still bewildered, Li Kaiyun explained with a slightly shaking voice. Half of it was because of the early morning radiance shining from the east, the other half the glory these two emblems represented. This black-robed, single-eyed lecturer who walked from the east side was incomparably dazzling. Follow me. This black-robed single-eyed lecturer spoke these two words indifferently, bringing all of the new students to a broken covered bridge. Below the bridge was an overhanging cliff. A silver zipline and a similarly silver-white chain extended side by side into a valley. There were slipknots at each interval on the silver zipline, hanging from them tension bars, seemingly made to be held onto. If you all aren't too stupid, you all should have already learned that this is our Green One Academy's silver-thread zipline from lecturer Mu Qin. Zhao Qin, step forward. A short and skinny youngster from North Tide City squeezed his way out from the crowd, about to lose his head out of fear. Hold on to it tightly, and then slide your way down. The black-robed single-eyed lecturer gave the book in his hands a look, then briefly examined Zhao Qin, noting some of his distinctive features, and then said this directly and clearly. Zhao Qin's face was completely white. When he saw the several hundred meters tall cliff, he didn't dare make any movements. Ah! He released a sharp cry. The black-robed single-eyed lecturer gave Zhao Qin's bottom a ruthless kick, and then the latter directly slid down along the silver-thread zipline. We have to go down just like that, what if we didn't hold on tightly enough? Amidst Zhao Qian's miserable scream, a self-defense department new student backed up a few steps, his legs shaking. Then you'll fall to your death. The black-robed single-eyed lecturer gave this new student a look, and then mocked, if you can't even hold on tightly, then this can also be considered a way to prevent this academy from losing face in the future. What is your name? Tu Xiaomeng. Alright, it's now your turn. Pft. When he saw this new student get kicked in the bottom again, flying out with his face completely pale, Lin Shi couldn't help but laugh out loud. What is your name? The black-robed single-eyed professor's eyes immediately stopped on Lin Shi's body. Lin Shi. Consequently, under Mu Shanzi and Qiu Lu's eyes that were filled with delight at Lin Shi's disaster, Lin Shi became the third person to stand on the cliff. However, what immediately left these two speechless, made their eyes widen, was that before the black-robed single-eyed professor even did anything, Lin Shi already slid down extremely naturally. Lin Shi's mood was carefree and full of excitement, the naturally majestic scenery and beautiful palaces between the mountains making this trip down the zip line even more interesting than the roller coasters he was familiar with. He passed through the rising mist between the mountains, making his way through the unique-smelling forest before finally making contact with a heavily padded wooden wall. The two deathly pale self-defense department new students looked at the smiling Lin Shi with the eyes of looking at a freak, while Lin Shi himself was still in the condition to smile in their direction before sizing up this valley. This valley wasn't that large, an expanse of purple orchids planted on the slope, a clear stream slowly flowed along it. On the plains next to this stream was an airy grass hut. A faint fragrance filled the skies. There were finger-sized little fish swimming about in the clear spring water, unexpectedly not at all alarmed by the sudden activity, instead continuing to swim as usual. L.RG Self-Defense Department new students bumped into the heavily padded wall one after another before falling down, and then finally, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer was like a black hawk, loosening his hand and landing stably on the ground without even making contact with that wall. He didn't say anything, only making a gesture. Just like that, the black-robed lecturer led Lin Shi and the other self-defense department new students into the grass hut next to the stream. At one end of the open-style grass hut was a short rectangular platform, on it a black longbow. On the other side were blue-green-colored bamboo mats. The stream released soft murmuring sounds, a clear breeze blowing through this place. After the single-eyed black-robed lecturer took a seat on the platform, he began the lesson. Do you all feel that I am purposely showing off, wearing these two emblems even though I am just here to give a lecture? The single-eyed black-robed lecturer swept his eyes over all of the self-defense department new students coldly. No one uttered a sound. Even if this thought couldn't help but emerge in some of their minds, who would dare rashly step out and criticize an academy lecturer's way of doing things? This was an order left behind by the principal. During each lecturer's first official lesson, they must wear their emblems. Why is that? Finally, a rather daring new student spoke out. This new student had sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, his posture upright and proper. His figure gave off the feeling of being a child from an influential family, carrying a natural sense of pride. He was the one from Central Continent Imperial City, Dugu Shueting. Without a goal to use as comparison, how can one go beyond? It is precisely these emblems that allow the academy to stand tall here, giving you all the chance to sit here today. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer swept his eyes over every single self-defense department new student, looking at the brand new blue clothes they wore. You all must remember that the black robes I wear, as well as the academy uniform you all wear, are the most important emblems. You all haven't achieved anything, yet you've already acquired such honor. That is why in the future, all of you must do much more to make up for this glory that has already been bestowed upon all of you. A new student asked respectfully, does every single academy lecturer have these types of emblems? The single-eyed black-robed lecturer wasn't fazed in the slightest. With a sneer, he said, or else what? Will you all feel that the Academy's lecturers are actually of little value? Only by becoming someone with at least 2 emblems of this grade does one have the qualifications of becoming an Academy lecturer. While another uproar erupted here, Lin Shi, who had already learned from Li Kaiyun that a single one of these emblems could ensure the rank of city supervisor in the outside world, couldn't help but recall Xia Yanbing and Mu Qin, then this was to say, Xia Yanbing, who seemed extremely young and that seemingly calm and collected woman already achieved countless astonishing feats. 1. Harry Potter Character Chapter Volume 127 Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Reverence binds a person, tradition can establish conviction. The reason the principal set this rule should also be connected to what he said here. However, the freshman dormitory's first rule is a bit strange and unreasonable. Qiu Lu suddenly said this. The first half seemed to have some depth, but the latter half made many people roll their eyes. To go from the emblems representing glory to the first rule of not being allowed to enter other people's rooms, this line of thinking really was jumping a bit too far. This was set by the principal, so there is definitely a special reasoning behind it. There were some among the new students who didn't really approve of this tender-faced but overbearing youngster, so someone immediately spoke out. Qiu Lu sneered and said, "Who said that whatever the principal said is definitely right? I recall that before coming, the professor has told us that we can call any part of our Green One Academy into question." Perhaps because he felt like using the principal's own words against the principal's regulations, this type of comeback was extremely good. Qiu Lu's pretty little face revealed a bit of a pleased expression. However, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer instead spoke in a cold voice without the slightest hesitation. What the principal said is naturally correct. Qiu Lu's face went momentarily blank, but he was still unconvinced, saying, "I didn't have any intention of disrespecting Principal Zhang, but nobody is perfect. If we are to say that the principal's words are completely true, isn't this a bit too extreme? When I say that the principal's words are naturally correct, it isn't because he is a perfect person, but because he is extremely strong to the point where no one in all of Yunqin Empire can defeat him." The single-eyed lecturer said coldly. Qiu Lu's small face paled, suddenly recalling that if he was trying to argue with someone who was undefeated throughout Yunqin Empire, if he was wrong, the other side could easily beat him to death, so they were naturally correct. The corners of Lin Shi's lips instead produced a hint of a smile. It seemed like that middle-aged uncle really brought many changes to this world full of antiquity. Even the words this single-eyed black-robed lecturer had just spoken were already enough to give one a vague sense of the Academy's way of handling things. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer gave the quiet Qiu Lu a look, and then said, "Now, I will teach you all some of the most basic Academy rules. Apart from our self-defense department's required courses, the entire Academy has several dozen optional courses that can be chosen from. The detailed course list and other information will be posted on your freshman dormitory's entrance. Once you all have earned enough course credits, you may leave the freshman dormitory. There are even more courses and experiences you all can choose from. The lesson I am teaching you all today is a required course for all departments, Soul Force Cultivation." Just this sentence alone immediately made this entire Tranquil Valley's riverside grass hut become completely silent. It's finally starting. Lin Shi's attention was completely seized, focused on the single-eyed black-robed lecturer. If we view our bodies simply as a shell that houses the soul, then the blood that flows through our bodies is precisely what drives this shell to eat, sleep, walk, the source of all movement and power. Meanwhile, soul force can also be interpreted simply as something similar to blood in our bodies. Only, the soul force of normal people is too weak, to the extent where it can't even be sensed, unable to display any use. With the assistance of meditation and some medicine, our soul force can become stronger and stronger, from this become useful. In the beginning, it can allow us to control the circulation of blood and qi within our bodies, change the functionalities of our flesh, increase our strength. When one trains it to an even higher level, it can develop substance, be used to kill the enemy. In reality, almost all of the meditation methods are virtually the same. The key lies in a calm mind. For all cultivation places like the academies and sects, all known spiritual medicines that could assist in cultivation stop working once one reaches the fourth level. After one's soul force forms a core, they won't have any more use. There wasn't a hint of noise in the entire grass hut, because every single new student knew that self-defense department's greatest purpose was to face the enemy, to stop killing through killing. Meanwhile, soul force was the source of most of their enemies' methods and strength. This was why even if there were some parts they were confused over, they still didn't dare interrupt the single-eyed lecturer out of fear of missing out on some vital information. A calm mind refers to a peaceful heart, to not be distracted by anything, forget all sense of object and self, forgetting the flesh, only sensing one's spirit and soul. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer slowly but clearly continued, for all cultivators in this world, the most difficult part is sensing where one's soul, one's spirit is. We know that all of our observations, actions, and thoughts are influenced by our spirit and soul, yet we are unable to find it. Even though, when one sits long enough, there will be enlightenment, as long as one truly enters a state of meditation, even if one cannot sense their own soul force, in reality, the soul force would still experience some growth. However, for a normal person, the amount of time needed is often far too long, which is why for the overwhelming majority of those in this world, they won't be able to break through this juncture and become a cultivator. Generally speaking, in the dead of night, when all things are silent, this is when it is the easiest to enter a state of meditation, the effects of cultivation the most optimal. That is why once night falls, it is precisely the beginning for each cultivator. Meanwhile, when cultivators enter meditation cultivation, if another cultivator approaches and causes a disturbance in the soul force, it might very well cause the meditating cultivator to experience terrifying consequences. From what I have seen, there were some who became half paralyzed, with some even becoming idiots. That is why this was also the principal's strict rule, the true reason why the students, under no circumstances, are allowed to enter another's room. After saying these things, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer produced a white jade pill bottle from within his robes. He looked at the new students who were waiting for his next words. Each person gets one. After obtaining it, all of you are to immediately swallow it. Many of you might already know, but this is a clear truth pill, something unique to our Green One Academy. It can help you all obtain the breakthrough you all need to sense your own soul force in your path of cultivation. While looking at the new students whose eyes immediately began to burn with desire, the single-eyed lecturer said with a nod. An emerald green pill medicine the size of a soybean landed in Lin Shi's hands. This pill medicine had a soft luster, as if it was packed with the southern province's jade-colored misty rain. The fragrance it released was a bit similar to that of Cape jasmine. The academy that was reformed by you really is direct, Lin Shi smiled bitterly, shaking his head inwardly, swallowing this pill. During the difficult trek from Summer Spirit Lake to this Heaven Ascension mountain range, the Academy's professors already revealed that the reason why this academy was powerful was because of the cultivation conditions and great amount of resources that could be acquired more than once, but he still didn't expect this Green One Academy to actually be this direct, giving out this type of pill medicine on the very first lesson. Just from the single-eyed black-robed lecturer's brief introduction and the expressions of those golden spoon youngsters who clearly knew the value of this pill, Lin Shi already knew that this pill medicine was definitely shockingly precious. The pill seemed to dissolve upon contact. It was sweet and sour, just like the taste of a kiss. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer watched as everyone ingested the pill medicine. He coldly said, "You all can now start to enter a clear state of mind, forget the physical and the self, start meditating. Meditate right here." Several Golden Spoon youngsters cried out in shock, "Teacher, didn't your respected self just say that only in the middle of the night is it the best time to enter meditation? Moreover, we are all so close to each other, even though the grass hut was quiet, there was still water murmuring and birds chirping, a light breeze blowing past from time to time. These were things that could easily cause distractions. Moreover, everyone was so close to each other. For those who had some experience with cultivation, this place really wasn't that suitable for cultivation. However, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer's expression became ice-cold, carrying mockery, berating with a stern voice, with your current cultivation levels, even if you were to cultivate altogether, how can your soul force possibly influence those around you? Moreover, once I am able to teach you how to meditate even in this type of place, when you all return to the freshman dormitory and cultivate yourselves at night, would there be any more issues? Close your eyes, you all are not permitted to speak. From here on out, only when I tell you all to open your eyes will you all open your eyes again. Lin Shi closed his eyes, full of expectations, but he instead heard the single-eyed black-robed lecturer continue in a strict voice, those who are cultivating for the first time and those who cannot meditate, you all can use breathing, awareness, guidance, these three methods. When your tongue touches the roof of your mouth, when your saliva enters your belly, picture heavenly water pouring into your throat, irrigating your entire body, and then bring this cycle back to the start. Slowly clear your mind of everything, allow your mind to become completely empty. Lin Shi didn't act stubbornly, not planning to completely rely on sitting quietly alone to challenge that self-forgetting state of meditation, instead doing things as he was taught by the single-eyed black-robed lecturer. Before this, he had never came into contact with something like soul force cultivation. However, Lin Shi, who viewed himself as a tourist, had a mind that was much more pure and bright than most people in this world. He didn't have any restraints like fame and profit holding him back, which was why what left even himself shocked was that he entered the so-called meditation state even faster than Tang Ku and those other border barbarians who had already cultivated for several years. The creek released soft murmuring sounds, birds chirping amidst fragrant flowers, a gentle breeze blew past. At first, what appeared were the swaying weeds on Deerwood Town's timely wind and rain memorial arch, the figures of 2 adults and 1 child standing at the head of the town with an old yellow dog, but this only made his mind become even more peaceful. He gradually forgot his own existence, as if he was now standing in the endless void. In his line of sight, there was only a lump of green light that resembled a roulette. Meanwhile, next to the green light was a wave of heat that gathered, slowly forming a moving golden radiance. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer quietly watched this group of self-defense department new students. The radiance outside the grass hut went from weak to strong, and then gradually became weak once more. Most of the self-defense department new students whose eyes were closed, yet their faces still had changes in expression from time to time, also gradually became exceptionally peaceful. There were several self-defense department new students who instead released snoring sounds. "Alright, open your eyes." Following a fierce and sharp shout from the single-eyed black-robed lecturer, the calm and peaceful Lin Shi and the other self-defense department new students' bodies trembled, opening their eyes, the faces of the students who released snoring sounds immediately flushing red. Lin Shi was immediately stunned, because the world around him had unknowingly already changed from early morning to nighttime. Chapter Volume 2:1. Those who move with the wind. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This was this world's cultivation. Lin Shi suddenly missed the fatty roasted meat he ate a few days ago on that difficult journey, because the moment he opened his eyes, he saw that the grass hut was already covered in a sunset hue. An unprecedented feeling of hunger immediately attacked his brain. This meditation that lasted from morning to evening not only completely erased all of the food he ate earlier, it also gave him a type of feeling as if he had just taken a massive poop. This made his stomach feel even more empty, even more unbearably hungry. Right now, in his brain, that green sphere could clearly be sensed, while the swirling yellow radiance became a stream, swimming about his dantian. Apart from those new students who fell asleep, the other students' faces all more or less carried expressions of shock. The shock on the customarily stooped-postured Tang Ku's face was even stronger. The Academy's fame and glory reached every corner sunlight could reach in this empire. He understood extremely well just how extraordinary and divine the cultivators of Green One Academy were, also aware of just how valuable and hard to obtain every single pill medicine released by the Academy was, but in his, as well as the subconscious minds of all cultivators he encountered, pills were still external objects in the end. However now, the originally thumb-sized stream in his dantian doubled in size. You, try to draw this longbow. Right at this time, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer instead stood up. He raised the black longbow on the long platform before him, bringing it directly before Lin Shi. Lin Shi, who was about to go mad from his struggle with hunger, widened his eyes, accepting the longbow, but not really knowing what to do with it. He couldn't understand why out of everyone here, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer would choose him. The black longbow was made of wood, but the natural wooden lines were so detailed it made the bow look like it was made from fine metal threads, the bow itself also having runes carved onto it. 2 carved dragon heads bit the similarly pitched black and non-reflective bowstring. The corners of Lin Shi's mouths suddenly produced a bitter smile. This black longbow wasn't heavy, he could raise it with a single hand, but when his right hand moved to the bowstring, exerting all of his strength, he was only able to pull it back about 2 finger lengths. Right at this moment, that wave of energy within his dantian suddenly seemed to have been sucked out, surging towards his right arm, and then towards his fingers. The bowstring trembled a bit, releasing an extremely faint golden radiance. Ah! Lin Shi released a low cry of alarm. This wave of energy that was guided out from his dantian was completely consumed. Moreover, he only now discovered that this bowstring made from the tendons of some type of beast also had some extremely fine runes carved on them. There is no need to worry. The energy you can sense will return through meditation cultivation. Meanwhile, the soul force cultivation itself won't decrease at all. It is similar to how our bodies remain, but our strength is used up. When he saw Lin Shi's current expression, the always cold-faced single-eyed black-robed lecturer who always seemed too stern said this with a bit of gentleness. Then, he took the black bow from Lin Shi's hands, and then handed it to Li Kaiyun at his side. Try to pull this longbow. Li Kaiyun didn't have any expectations, pulling the bow with everything he had. After Li Kaiyun was Tang Ku at his side. Under the single-eyed black-robed lecturer's guidance, the black bow was passed along the new students. After 15 or 16 people tried their hands at it, apart from a new student who fell asleep, everyone pulled a few more fingers of distance than Lin Shi. This was especially the case in Tang Ku's hands. This black bow with unknown origins was drawn halfway. When the others drew the bowstring, the yellow light on the bowstring was a bit brighter than when Lin Shi drew the bow. A strand of ash-gray hair landed on the single-eyed black-robed lecturer's left cheek, but this cold and stern lecturer didn't seem to notice at all, as he stared at Lin Shi. As the black bow was passed on, he released a slight sigh. Those able to enter as heaven's choice are special after all, never cultivated before, yet his speed of entering meditation is number 1 among this group. Only, it truly is a pity that your aptitude is only 2, truly unfortunate for a piece of rare good material. The black bow continued to circulate around. It entered the hands of Bian Linghan, who was standing next to Hua Jiyue. This young lady from Qiantang province was the weakest looking out of all the new self-defense department students, as well as the first one to collapse on the way here from Summer Spirit Lake. She also only managed to draw the bowstring around the same distance as Lin Shi. Right at this time, the unmoving black-robed lecturer's single eye suddenly shot out a frightening radiance. Only he noticed that when Bian Linghan drew the bowstring, the moment that golden light flickered, it was a bit longer than the others. However, he still didn't say anything, waiting until the black bow was passed through all of the new students' hands and handed back into his hands. Apart from Bian Linghan, when the yellow light flickered for the remaining people, there wasn't anything else unusual. Bian Linghan. Only, when they were heading back to the zip lines, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer who now added faces to the names shouted out Bian Linghan's name. I had all of you pull the black bow with all your strength. Just now, why did you not do so? Bien Lingen's face immediately became snow-white. She opened her mouth, but couldn't utter any sound. After a moment of silence, this thin and weak-looking young lady's hands held the corners of her clothes, lowering her head in preparation of receiving punishment. You didn't want him to feel that he wasn't even as good as you, thinking that he would be mocked by others. It seems like as a natural windstalker, the path ahead of you will be extremely long. However, at this moment, the corners of her eyes couldn't help but drift over to Lin Shi. When her head dropped, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer whose gaze was as sharp as an eagle's immediately understood what she was thinking. It has only been a few days, yet there are already people worrying for your sake. Heaven's choice. I never expected your relationship with others to be so good. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer didn't give out any punishment, instead looking at this skinny young lady who was clenching the corners of her clothes, saying, "Stay behind for now. The rest of you can return to the freshman dormitory and look over the course options list." "Why aren't you leaving yet?" What left the single-eyed black-robed lecturer a bit stunned was that while the other self-defense department new students all left the grass hut, looking at that mountaintop, looking for a way to slowly climb their way back up to the self-defense freshman dormitory, Lin Shi didn't leave the grass hut. Lin Shi bowed in an extremely respectful manner towards the single-eyed black-robed lecturer. "Teacher, Bien Linghan perhaps didn't hear too clearly, please don't punish her too severely." The single-eyed black-robed elder looked at Lin Shi, a bit speechless, his face cold. "What, don't tell me I need you to tell me how to handle things." Lin Shi immediately shook his head. "This disciple doesn't dare." "Only, Bien Linghan definitely didn't intend to make a mistake, and she definitely won't make the same mistake again." "Nonsense." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer roared out in anger. "Don't tell me you think I don't know the reason why she didn't use all her strength." Lin Shi was momentarily stunned. He only dared to stay behind because of his unique daily use ability. After speaking those words, it instead made the single-eyed black-robed lecturer this angry, he just couldn't understand why that was the case. Bien Linghan didn't say anything, so how could he possibly know why Bien Linghan didn't use all her strength? While looking at the stupefied Lin Shi, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer became even more unhappy. "Isn't it because of you? If you really are going to continue acting willfully here, I really am going to deduct 2 points from you too." "It was because of me." What kind of words are these? Lin Shi became more and more confused. However, after hearing the last line from the single-eyed black-robed lecturer's words, he grasped a bit of the true meaning. "Teacher, your respected self didn't plan on punishing her." "Who said that I was going to punish her just because I had her stay behind?" The single-eyed black-robed lecturer frowned. He suddenly discovered that when facing Lin Shi's pure eyes, he actually couldn't produce any anger. Lin Shi laughed, and then gave the single-eyed black-robed lecturer another respectful bow. In that case, this disciple tried to evaluate teacher's noble character with the eyes of a small person. If someone who could enter the academy as heaven's choice really was a small person, then that really would be insulting the vice principal and others as blind. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer waved his hand in a bit of an annoyed manner, indicating for the new students who stopped not far out to watch this to hurry and leave. Then, he surprisingly nodded towards the bamboo mat next to Bien Linghan. "Since you are willing to step out for her sake before me, I'll make an exception today. You can sit down here as well." Lin Shi sat down next to Bien Linghan, whose ears were a bit red, unable to make any sense of this situation. "You are a natural windstalker." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer didn't waste any words, looking straight at Bien Linghan, speaking each word slowly. Bien Linghan and Lin Shi looked at each other in confusion, neither of them understanding. Even so, Lin Shi's skin was extremely thick, directly asking, "What is a windstalker?" "Teacher, please help us dispel our confusion." When an arrow soars through the wind, it is difficult to grasp as the wind. Those with extremely high natural affinity with featherwind runes, the ones best at displaying the power of a bow and arrow, greatest talent in marksmanship, are called those who move with the wind, windstalkers. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer caressed the black bow. On the battlefield, windstalkers are always the most threatening, the most difficult to guard against. Featherwind runes, I reckon you don't know what these are either. After giving Lin Shi, who was listening with keen interest, a look, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer added, "These are the most optimal runes for bows and arrows, able to magnify the strength of a fired arrow, increase its speed, grant it astonishing penetrative force. Meanwhile, as for those with talent in becoming windstalkers, their soul force is able to last a bit longer on these runes. This brief moment that it can remain for, is what allows the power of the arrow to be much stronger than others with similar cultivation level and marksmanship skills." The reason you had Bian Linghan stay behind alone was because she was the only one with this type of potential among our self-defense department new students. The reason you had us pull the black bow was to test to see if any of us could be terrifying archers. Lin Shi suddenly saw the light. That isn't all. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer looked at Lin Shi with eyes carrying sympathy. It also revealed your body's degree of medicinal receptivity. Chapter Volume 2-2. Those who assassinate, will be targeted by assassinations in turn. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What is the degree of medicinal receptivity? The single-eyed black-robed lecturer was annoyed once again, but he still couldn't find it within himself to erupt in anger. He looked at Lin Shi, who asked such a stupid question, gave the bow's body a pat, and then, while holding back his annoyance, said, "Perhaps one of the most important factors when we talk about talent. To put it in a nutshell, it is just like eating. Others might be able to extract 70 to 80% of nourishment from a bowl of rice, while if you ate a bowl of rice, you would only absorb 30 or 40%. In the end, it is still an issue of having an aptitude of 2. Lin Shi looked at the vexed single-eyed black-robed lecturer with a somewhat wronged expression. However, didn't we already have this aptitude tested? Why did teacher still want to test this? Even though the soul inspection stone rarely makes a mistake, you are heaven's choice, so we all naturally still want to hold on to hope. Also, the main purpose of this black bow is to test for windstalkers." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer gave the innocent-faced Lin Shi a look, and then he truly began to feel a wave of baseless resentment, saying hatefully, "Talent is divided into many aspects: the speed of entering meditation cultivation, spiritual medicine receptivity, degree of resonance between soul force and runes. You have never cultivated before, yet you easily entered cultivation meditation. Number one among so many people, it really is rare. Based on what I know, not even the other 2 new students who entered via Heaven's Choice are able to enter meditation cultivation as quickly as you, and that is even during the quiet nighttime. That is why I had you draw the black bow first, but the benefits you obtain from that clear truth pill are no different from others with an aptitude of 2. It was the same spiritual pill, yet his cultivation increased the lowest. From the test's results and this single-eyed black-robed lecturer's expression of impatience and disappointment, he already came to this conclusion. Towards this, he didn't feel all that dejected, because from the bit that middle-aged uncle left him, he knew that both him and that middle-aged uncle's aptitudes were really second. It was because according to the information that middle-aged uncle left on the steel, the interior of the people of this world were like a bowl, while him and that middle-aged uncle's bodies were like 2 bowls. When the same amount of water was placed in a single bowl versus 2 bowls, the double bowl's water level would naturally be lower. However, in reality, when the 2 bowls' contents were added together, there was no difference at all compared to the single bowl. That's why my aptitude should at least be 2 2s, which is 4, moreover, my meditation cultivation speed is even first. Lin Shi was instead rather self-satisfied, the corners of his lips curling upwards as he looked towards the single-eyed black-robed lecturer, asking, "Teacher, is my speed of entering meditation cultivation really number 1?" In that case, why did those of other departments have their first cultivation lesson yesterday evening? One thing you all have to understand is that even the worst of our Green One Academy students, when they go out into the outside world, scattered across the border armies, will still be like cranes among chickens. The students of other departments will unavoidably have to temper themselves on the battlefield, with many special operations even needing the coordination of students from different departments. However, our self-defense department is different. If we can't cultivate during the day, or enter meditation on a war-torn battlefield amidst shouts of war to recover our soul force, how will we bear the consumption of soul force? Even if we reach the state night level of cultivation, once our soul force is consumed, we wouldn't even be a match for soul experts. That is why it is fine for other departments, but for our self-defense department, we must be able to quickly enter that state under any environment. Of course, even out of all the students up to the ones who have just graduated, not many are able to enter meditation on the battlefield, replenishing soul force at any time. Based on your performance today, it originally seemed like you could easily accomplish this, having the talent of a great general. When he spoke up to hear, the single-eyed black-robed lecturer looked at Lin Shi and said, "But you have to understand that meditation cultivation and replenishing of soul force are roughly the same for everyone. Even if you can enter this state quickly, able to cultivate an hour or two more than other students, your degree of medicinal receptivity is still the most important aspect of aptitude." Using the Academy's Clear Truth pill as an example, a single pill is equivalent to 2 to 3 years of a beginner cultivator's cultivation accumulation. They're that powerful. Then since I've entered as Heaven's choice, my speed of entering meditation so great, wouldn't it be fine if I was just given a few more Clear Truth pills? Keep dreaming. The single-eyed lecturer was triggered by Lin Shi's shameless words to the point where he almost coughed out a mouthful of blood. Forget about the rarity of the Clear Truth pill's ingredients. Each year, our academy can only make enough to supply each new student with a single one. Moreover, the Clear Truth pill is just like many other medicines, only useful once. There aren't any additional benefits when more are ingested. If you are able to develop a new pill medicine, or manage to produce one that can be used repeatedly, then congratulations. Who knows, you might very well become our Green One Academy's vice principal. In addition, I might as well just tell you right now that apart from this Clear Truth pill, which can directly add you to the ranks of cultivators, being a direct gift from the Academy, from today on, there are no pills that can be consumed for free. The remaining pills needed for cultivation have to be exchanged for through the points you all acquire. The Academy wouldn't waste the limited medicines on some good.4.nothing's body. After a slight pause, when he saw that Lin Shi didn't seem dejected at all, he couldn't help but add this. Lin Shi looked at the single-eyed black-robed lecturer for a long time, and then said, "It seems like reaching the so-called state night level of cultivation is extremely difficult, or else teacher definitely wouldn't become this upset, feeling such disappointment and frustration." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer stared blankly for a moment, and then in a somewhat speechless manner, said, "As long as you understand. It seems like you do listen rather well." Lin Shi then asked, "Then why is it that once we reach the state night level, pill medicines become useless? Why, do you think we have answers for everything?" The single-eyed black-robed lecturer said with a sneer, "The principal hated researching these useless things with principles that couldn't be understood the most. In the thousands of years that have passed, once the state night level is reached, everyone has had to rely on their own meditation cultivation. This is, unless you can develop some type of pill medicine that can be used." "I understand." Lin Shi gave the thin and weak-looking Bian Ling Han, who didn't say anything all this time, a look and said, "Teacher, since your respected self already saw that she was a natural wind stalker, why didn't you directly say it, instead having her mysteriously stay behind? Our Yunqin Empire's wars have never ended. The disciples sent out by the great academies are the cornerstones of our empire's strength. Every elite student will become the target of other empires' assassinations. At the very least, a third of the country's talents weren't sacrificed honorably on the battlefield, but rather died under the assassinations of various experts. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer's face completely became ice-cold. He looked at Lin Shi and Bian Linghan, saying, "Powerful and slippery windstalkers will always be high up on the lists of assassination. Which is why if we can keep it a secret, then we should do our best to keep it a secret." Lin Shi's expression immediately became serious. This little black was left behind by the principal. It seems identical to other black great bows, but in reality, there are some slight differences. That is why not even the Academy's senior students know that I can detect the potential of windstalkers through this. No one will know that the reason why I had Bian Linghan stay behind isn't to punish her, but rather because she has this type of talent. That is why if you don't want her to become a target of assassination before she obtains some accomplishments, then it is best if you also keep this secret. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer looked at Lin Shi, saying with narrowed eyes. Lin Shi stared blankly for a moment, and then gave this black-robed lecturer an extremely serious bow of respect. This disciple thanks teacher for his trust. The single-eyed black-robed lecturer withdrew his gaze, and then coldly said, "There is no need to thank me, this trust comes from the vice-principal and the others' heaven's choice judgment. Also, you are extremely clean, impossible for you to have any type of corruption in family background. Deerwood Town really is remote, practically no one going through that place. It isn't only your Lin family, almost all of Deerwood Town's residents have been extremely clean for many generations. Moreover, apart from the few nearby towns, you all don't have much contact with the rest of the world." Lin Shi stuck out his tongue, saying in shock, "You guys investigated that thoroughly. Don't tell me, your current considerations aren't bad." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer saw through Lin Shi's thoughts, nodding and saying, "Just like how we will plant spies in enemy empires, the other side will do the same in ours. Even though our investigations are extremely thorough, it is difficult to guarantee that none of Yunqin Empire's enemies have infiltrated our academy. Even though you all will definitely be safe in the academy, there have been assassinations that have happened when students leave the academy to undergo self-tempering trials." Lin Shi shivered slightly. He couldn't help but turn around to look at Bian Linghan. The small face of this thin and weak-looking young lady from South Rainmist region was a bit pale, her small hands clutching the corners of her dress shaking slightly. Lin Shi released a light sigh. He knew that her loyalty towards her country and her sense of responsibility would prevent her from ever feeling as flexible and easygoing as himself, purely desiring a life that was a bit more brilliant and interesting. She would instead definitely face this heavy mission that was suddenly placed on her frail shoulders with an attitude of no return. "In the following month, I will leave 2 hours of time open to teach her some techniques of windstalkers." The single-eyed black-robed lecturer gave Bian Linghan a look, also releasing a light sigh inwardly. However, the expression on his face was still resolute and ice-cold, shifting back to Lin Shi's body. "For the sake of not arousing suspicion, I will declare that your words have angered me, that in the following month of time, the two of you have to work in Medicine Valley for 2 hours as punishment. If you are interested, you can learn a bit as well." Lin Shi couldn't help but smile, saying, "Teacher, it seems like your respected self still can't let go of all hope in me, right?" The single-eyed black-robed lecturer gave Lin Shi an expressionless look, directly saying coldly, "Class dismissed."